Hi, I'm Bob Knote, and on this episode of the Camp Chaos Chronicles, we're going to get started on the bell housing for our manual transmission conversion. This is a bell housing, but this ain't it. Dang it. Several years ago, in fact, 2009, when I was putting my track car together, I was faced with the problem of building a manual transmission conversion for it without spending a ton of money. At one point, I had to come up with a bell housing. And at that time, they were available, but they were about $500 a piece, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot of money, but I just didn't have it at the time. There was other things on that project I needed to spend the money on. I began to look at ways of doing that on the cheap. And one of those was to actually take a automatic transmission bell housing and convert that to enclose a clutch and all the other stuff associated with it. Now this is one off of a TH400. I actually cut it on the bandsaw and we milled it flat. And there are other reasons that we needed this for, but it occurred to me that what we could do is we could actually take a bell housing, weld a flange on here, and that could work, and it could. But the TH400 was a one-piece case, and what I looked at was the transmission out of the pre-HE, which is a Borg-Warner unit, which had a separate bell housing. Problem with that is that it has the dowel locations for locating the bell housing and the transmission along the center line of the crank. Those are in a different position than they were on the HE engines. And so what I did is I cut out the dowels and I moved them. And it looked like it was going to work, but you know, it got to the point then where I got to come up with a flange for the back of the bell housing and weld that on, and there's a lot involved in it. And finally I got to the point where I realized that, you know what, a bell housing is a pretty simple thing. It's a flange on the engine, a flange on the transmission, and then just something in between. The only problem with that is that it's got to be the right length. So I began to research it, and I actually developed a bell housing for the track car that's been working perfectly. So I've decided that we're going to do that with the manual transmission conversions for the street cars. It's probably going to be a three-part video series. The first one that we're going to do now is about making the flange for the bell housing to bolt onto the engine, which ultimately ends up looking like this. And building a bell housing yourself is pretty simple. It's just not easy, if that makes sense. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is to secure a piece of 1/4 inch thick cold rolled steel, 16.5 by 20 inch, in order to make the flange for bolting the bell housing onto the block. This can be a bit complicated if you were to do it the way that I do it, and that is to actually take a cylinder block, cut off the back two cylinders, and then chuck this up on the table of my vertical mill, and then use the DRO in order to locate, first of all, the center, and put that in the middle of that plate, and then pick off these holes using a drill bit that is the same tap size as these bolt holes. Okay, and then what you do is you put the steel plate on the table and get it all squared up, and then just drill the holes. I would not recommend doing this in your case unless you got a spare block laying around. This particular one right here, the reason that I cut this off the back of a block, first of all, don't get upset that I ruined a really good block, because of the fact that this is the one that was in the video of the worst case scenario of pulling the heads off a Jaguar V-12. The bottom end of this engine got so hot that some of the bearings actually brazed themselves onto the block. So this block is junk without a lot of machine work. So we're going to take this one and actually use this to make a welding jig in order to make a number of steel bell housings for a manual transmission conversion for the 5.3 liter Jaguar V-12. Now, what you can do in your case, being that you don't have a engine block laying around that you can destroy, what you can do is take your transmission and just stand it upright on this plate. Make sure that everything's on. By the way, you want to make sure that the top is all the way up, because what we're actually going to be doing is making a ring that goes all the way around, because we're going to be welding sort of a angel food cake pan shaped thing onto the flange to bolt of the block. So be sure that's all the way up, and then what you can do is buy yourself a set of these, which is a set of transfer punches. And if you look at the end of a transfer punch, it's of a certain diameter. I think it goes every 64th of an inch, and it's actually got a point on the end. So what you can do is you can take, once you've got the bell housing where you want, you can go around to the various bolt holes. This one is for the starter bolt holes. And take the right size punch and just go around, and you can locate where all these holes are. Now the issue is that when you get to the dowel positions, these are really critical to be able to get these right on the nose. So by the way, this is the process I used to do my first bell housing for my track car, and it worked out great. But here you got an issue. Unless you got a 5/8 transfer punch that you can use here, these dowel holes, what I did is I machined a bushing that would fit in the hole and also had the diameter of the transfer punch drilled in the middle, so I could actually position it in here and do the same thing on both sides. Now, again, I said it's really critical to get those two holes in the right position, because if they're not, you're not going to be able to get the bell housing on the engine. Plus the fact that you're going to use these to key the hole up here that the transmission front bearing support is going to key into. More on that later. Now I would also put some cross marks in here in the very middle of the sheet. This essentially is the middle of the crankshaft right here. So you're going to want to have that position, because this whole thing has got to sort of key together on the middle of the crankshaft. So another thing that I would do is, just to make sure that everything's going the right way, I would take a large compass, one of which I don't have here presently, but take a large compass and draw around the outside of the bell housing flange as well as the inside, and you can pick that information off of right here, this edge, and also the inside of these bosses that are cast into the bell housing. So just a good thing to kind of give you an idea of, okay, when I drill that hole, it should be about in the middle of that flange and so forth all the way around. And what you're going to do later then is you're going to be cutting that out with a plasma cutter or a torch. I'd really recommend a plasma cutter if you can find one, because it's a lot cleaner. It's going to give you a smaller width kerf all the way around. It just works a lot better. Here we got the 1/4-inch plate mounted on the table of my Nanton, I forget what size it is, vertical milling machine, knee mill. It's equipped with a DRO, which I use to pick the bolt hole positions off of that back 2 cylinders of a V12 block. and it came up with that plan right there. And unfortunately, it's flipped end for end because here on the plate, the top is up here, and on the plan, the top is down here. And unfortunately, I put the plan together. It worked out 180 degrees different in order for me to be able to get all the way from the top to the bottom of the plate within the travel of the y-axis. X, not a big deal. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drill some holes. See what we got. Well, we've got the holes drilled and everything's looking really, really good. You can see that all the bolts are in here. The 2 bolts here for the starter, there's no threads involved in either the plate or the engine itself. So we're gonna have to see whether these holes are right on the nose when we actually get the bell housing done, and see if a starter will actually bolt up to the engine. If not, it's just gonna be a matter of maybe drilling a little bit bigger hole or taking a die grinder and clean it out. But I think just looking at what they are on the back side here, they're centered on the opening. I think they're going to be fine. So all of these went in by hand all the way down. So they're right on the nose. You may have noticed that when I was drilling these holes that I actually performed 3 operations. The first one, I used a center drill to locate exactly the center of the holes, so the drill bit could get a good start right on the nose where that hole is supposed to be. Then I went around and drilled a smaller pilot hole, and then came back and did another pass with the final diameter drill bit. And this, I feel, is more accurate than just taking that drill bit and just drilling the holes through. The drill bit could actually wander around until it finds a soft spot in the material and then start drilling. Not much, just a few thousandths of an inch, but these hole locations are pretty important. So perfect. Well, except for one thing. Some bonehead put the 3/4 inch drill bit in the position of the 5/8, and we appear to have overshot on the dowel hole diameter. Not once, but twice. Okay, this isn't the end of the world. All I really need to do here is to take some 3/4 inch galvanized round steel, chuck it up in my lathe and drill a 5/8 hole in the middle of it, and then cut off some 1/4 inch bushings and tap them in place. And then around the perimeter of this opening on both sides, take a center punch and peen, or what's called stake, this bushing in. And that hole and that hole are going to be the perfect diameter apart from each other. So I'd rather have just drilled 5/8 holes to accomplish the same thing, but this is going to work fine. So at this point, what I need to do is I need to make a tool that I can use to use my plasma cutter like a compass. You can see the inside diameter right here of the bell housing. If I can use this to just cut perfect circle on the inside, that'd be great. Same thing on the outside, but it can't go all the way around because you got the starter blister here and you got a little protuberance here that this dowel is housed in. And so now it looks like there's a lot of waste on this plate. We're just using this thing in order to make this flange. Well, that's not actually true, because this is going to be the center of the hole or the bore that the front bearing retainer on the transmission is gonna fit in, thereby indexing the input shaft of the transmission to the center of the crankshaft. Okay, this piece right here is actually going to be up here when the bell housing is completed. Once we get this thing cut out, what we need to do at that point is to figure out what this ring of 3/16 cold rolled steel is going to have to look like measurement wise. Not only the length, the circumference of the circle, but also the thickness of it. And in order to really understand what that's going to look like, I'm going to have to order up about $3,000 worth of transmission so that we can get exactly everything we need off of it information-wise in order to finish this thing up. Now, there are those among you that might be asking the question, in order to simplify this process, why not, since you've already got the flange here, find a hydroformed steel bell housing for the transmission you want to use, cut off that flange, trim it up, and then weld it onto this. Well, the thought had occurred to me, and that's a really good idea, except we're looking at about $1,100 to $1,200 just to buy the bell housing. What we're looking at here when we get done is maybe $150 worth of material. So there you have it. I really love doing this more than anything else. We're going to be making some changes in the business this year because I need to do more of this. Got this plate all ready to be plasma cut. You remember that I drilled these holes oversized. The way I sized them down was to make a bushing on my lathe that had the correct outside and inside diameter that enabled me to reduce that size. Now, in my opinion, I mean, if I was just doing a hole that I drilled improperly that a bolt goes through, I'd just make a straight bushing, square on the inside and the outside, and then just use a center punch to tap it in from both sides. In this case, though, what I did is I put this plate back on the jig, that engine block that I'd cut up, and these bushings are actually, the top and the bottom edge are tapered, so that when I took the center punch and peened it in or staked it in, just the material on the bell housing piece or the flange would be displaced inward. The bushing itself would be pretty much unaffected, so that the dowel wouldn't be squeezed any more than it would be under normal circumstances, and I did that on both sides. A couple of things. First of all, this is a great way to deal with a mistake that you made, like I did. And the other thing is, you know, that lathe, that little Enco 9-inch lathe that I bought years and years ago for $150 has just been invaluable for doing odd jobs like this around the shop. Probably one of the tools that I use more than anything else. Then we have this little tool. What we got here is a couple of little wheels, couple of little rollers. Kind of reminds me of those little carts that little doggies who have lost their use of their hind legs, they get strapped into and they run around living their best life. It's kind of the same thing for your plasma cutter. You install it like this. It's got a 1/4-inch bolt back here. And then this thing, this little carriage out here, actually was $8 on Amazon. And it's for this purpose, to be used with plasma cutters to help maintain the distance between the nozzle and the workpiece. Your plasma cutter fits in like this. And it kind of walks around like that. You could do this by hand. In fact, I did it by hand on my original one. It was pretty ugly, but it's kind of why they make disc grinders. So now what you need to do, obviously, is you need to cut the outside circumference first. If you don't, if you do the inside, then you've lost that right there, that hole, that 1/4 inch hole, which is going to be really important later on for reasons I'll explain at that time. But you would cut the outside first and then the inside later. Now, you'll notice that I've got a line that I've drawn on the outside. What I did is I took the bell housing, and you could take your transmission, turned it upside down, lined up the dowel holes, and then went ahead and took a Sharpie and scribed it on the outside. And what I did in the inside, you can reach in the bottom of the bell housing and make these marks right here for the boss on the inside. This is important because it's gotta be, when you make your cut, it's gotta be on the inside of that Sharpie line right there, or the outside of it rather, on this side of it. Because otherwise your flywheel, the ring gear in your flywheel will make contact with your bell housing, which is a pain in the neck. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. So now obviously we can't take our plasma cutter and go through there. What we got to do is stop here, stop there. Same thing around here. Stop here, start there. And we'll have to do that by hand later. Not awful, but you know, we're gonna have to clean that up with a grinder when we get done. So let's see what happens. Got the outside circumference cut. Now you notice we got a really nice clean cut all the way around here till we get to here. The problem is that my little Air Force 400 plasma cutter by Hobart struggles with 1/4 inch plate. So there were a lot of stop and starts on both sides here, but I left it big enough where I can clean that up with a grinder. There we have our engine flange for the Jaguar 5.3 liter V-12 manual transmission conversion. And you see that things look a whole lot nicer once you get done grinding things down. I think the issue with the plasma cutter was that I don't have a real good ground. I said that this was cold rolled steel. It's actually hot rolled steel, and there's a scale on the outside, and I'm just wondering, I'm not well versed in the use of a plasma cutter, but I'm wondering if there's just some sort of continuity issue between ground and the torch because of the scale. So you'll notice that I didn't cut out the starter recess here that the starter fits up into the bell housing through. I'm going to wait about cutting that out until I actually get the entire thing welded up, so that I've got the starter blister here that will stabilize this area so that it doesn't warp up. And here's the piece that I cut out of the middle. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to form the part of the bell housing that the transmission bolts to. That gets some special treatment here in a little bit. After we get the thing all welded up, then we got to deal with that hole there. Now, as you can see, I've got a number of these bell housing flanges, and the fact is we're going to be building 3 different projects that will require a manual transmission, so going to do them all at one time. Now, what we've got is the flanges made, which actually is the most complex part of the whole process, and we've got the tops, or in the car to be the rear of the bell housing made. We just need to bore that center hole out a bit in order to accommodate the transmission. But the next step will be to get the transmission in, which is going to be a close ratio TKX Tremec transmission that would fit in a Chevrolet of some kind. It's got a 26 spline input shaft. And then once we get that in, we can start to figure out the dimensions of the can itself, or the cylinder that's going to form the body of the bell housings. So fun times around here in terms of what those actual projects are. More on that later. You never know what's going to happen around here, but I have a plan which will be divulged in due time. Now, if you would like these videos and you want to see more of them, like, subscribe, maybe leave some comments down below so we know we can do better. And we'll see you the next time on the Camp Chaos Chronicle.